Dirk now joins us here on The Score. Dirk, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, Laurence, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so I just saw that you tweeted something out saying that you don't like the concept that there was a deal in place between Adam LaRoche and the White Sox as far as his kid goes. Well, what did you mean by that?
Well, what I'm saying is simply this. If the White Sox management can talk to every single player in that locker room and negotiate on their behalf with Adam LaRoche specifically, that's one thing, but that's something they can't do. So you're telling me that everyone on the team signed up to be Adam LaRoche's babysitter, Drake's babysitter? I don't buy that. And the way I understand this is that it's just as I said in my Vice article. I'm sure there are guys in that locker room that are tired of having to mind their P's and Q's because there's a 14-year-old boy around all the time. I mean, look, I've spent 10 years of my life inside of professional locker rooms. I can tell you there's just some things in the locker room you cannot unsee, and you don't need a kid around that when it happens. It's a workplace environment. Now, I grant you this. Sometimes what happens in the locker room doesn't always look like work. It can be very juvenile. It can be very jocular, but it's a safe space for guys who have earned the right to be there. And if they want to let cuss words fly or talk about affairs or drink beers after a ball game, they don't have to worry about being the best role model for some 14-year-old kid that may not understand the silence rule. Like, it's just a simple fact. Kids can be a distraction, and I think that when this whole negotiations agreement for Adam LaRoche to be able to bring his kid into the locker room was put in place and a handshake was made, and we want to talk about loyalty. It was never written down. It was never in a contract. We're talking about an agreement between ownership and Adam LaRoche, and I assume that ownership said, I'm going to shake his hand and say yes, because surely no one in their right mind would have their son at 100% of every one of our functions. I mean, kids have lives, right? They have school, right? Well, apparently not this one.
Yeah, and that's something that people have been talking about too, where it is a function of the relationship between Adam LaRoche and his son. And look, I'm not here to judge that. It is what it is. That's the way that he wants to raise his son. But your point, I think, is an excellent one, that it's not up to the rest of those guys to have to look out for his son. And they keep saying, well, he's like a 26th member of the team. At least the ones that are pro LaRoche are saying that. That's great, but you can also be that without having to be there a majority of the time.
Oh, I 100% agree. Look, we've had kids. Okay, here's the real issue, right? Adam LaRoche's son may be the best ambassador of children in a locker room that has ever been around the game of baseball. But there are other kids out there who are absolute freaking hellions, okay? You're talking about prima donna athletes who got married to cheerleader idiots, and they had an abundance of sex drive and a scarcity of condoms, and out popped a child that does not get good parenting but belongs to a superstar, and they don't want to have him around. Mommy doesn't want to have him around while she's out shopping for diamonds and spending daddy's millions. So go off and be with daddy in the locker room where you can raise all kind of hell and get into people's stuff and break things, and no one can say anything to you because your dad's a star. Well, you know what? Management doesn't make an unspoken agreement with that guy because management really hopes that kid doesn't show up. The problem is that if management makes an agreement with the guy who has a great kid, he's also, in a way, making that agreement with everyone who's not a good parent, whose kid is a disaster, whom you don't want around the team. And so that's why when you set a precedent with one player, with one kid, you're actually making that agreement with everybody, and that is how you turn a locker room into an awkward place, because now it's not a question of, do I want your kid here or not? Now it's a question of, dude, I got to talk to you about how you're doing your family thing. I got to talk to you about boundaries. I got to talk to you about, I don't like how your kid's behaving right now, but I don't know if it's my place to scold him. Are you going to tell Mrs. LaRoche about this? Is my wife going to catch hell from your wife? I mean, it's a family structure. And when you bring kids into it, look, even just T-ball games when kids don't get along are enough to drive entire neighborhoods apart. You don't need multimillionaires that need to have good relationships in order to put up big production numbers for an entire city. You don't need drama there, and kids are a great way to have that. I think management coming and saying, you can still have your kid here, just not 100% of the time. Can you figure out a solution? Is a really nice and civil way of addressing this. It's not like they're saying your kid can't be here anymore. You need to figure it out. Get rid of your kid. It was let's find a solution that's equitable, and apparently there is no negotiation here.
Dirk, you played in Major League Baseball. You spent a lot of time in the minors as well. Did you ever have any situations like this where there were kids around your team in your clubhouse?
All the time, every summer. I mean, we had situations where we had players who, you know, they had kids with a wife that wasn't around. They'd been divorced. The kids were their responsibility during the summer. There's nothing they could do with the kid. The girl that they were dating now really didn't want to play mommy, so the kid ended up in the locker room a lot. And they weren't, Dad's not there. They're too young to be out on the field with us all the time. So they're just in the clubhouse wrecking stuff. I mean, and it's frustrating. But what do you do as a player? I mean, you're going to pull somebody who's got more time? I mean, this is the really funny thing, right? Everything's about time and seniority. So how does a younger guy that doesn't want your kid around because he's annoying and he's a distraction address you, the older guy who has more time in the league than he does, and say, you need to clean up your act? What are you talking about, rookie? Go back to your hole and be quiet. Look, guys, I've seen some horrible things in the locker room. I mean, just stuff that no kid should let Major League Baseball players, or baseball players really of any level in professional sports, be the babysitter or teacher. I mean, for God's sakes, when I was in AA, we bought a mentally handicapped bat boy a prostitute, for crying out loud. I mean, these are the kind of things that happen in a locker room, okay? And I'm not just, this isn't just like brand new news. I wrote about this in a book. I mean, this is old school news, and it's rather tame. Why would you want your kid in that environment 100% of the time? So, yes, I've seen it. I don't approve of it. I don't think it's wise for a kid there to be there all the time. And if you think it's a learning opportunity, believe me, folks, these are some lessons you don't want your kids to learn.
How can the White Sox go about mending fences? Is there any way possible that happens?
Look, I think that the White Sox management here did what the White Sox management had to do. You had some guys that were complaining who wanted it to be addressed, and in a very mature way, they took it to the guy and said, we just need to make an adjustment. And then it got blown completely out of proportion. Why? Because you have big kids with lots of money and fame and star power turning this into some kind of martyrdom issue when really it's just about understanding boundaries. And you know what? Time is going to heal this wound, and so people are going to understand. And I think most people get it that really a locker room isn't a daycare or an elementary school or a middle school. In Drake's case, it's none of those things. It's a locker room, and it should always be a place where you get ready to go out and win a ball game, and everything else is accessory to that and can be cut if it doesn't serve the primary goal. So to hell with mending fences. Let's set some boundaries, let's set some adult rules, and let's all be mature enough to abide by them.
I was talking to a friend of mine. We're talking with Dirk Hayhurst, who spent time in Major League Baseball, spent a lot of time in minor league baseball, written books about the clubhouse experience, and writes for Vice Sports right now. I was talking with a friend of mine who covers a team, and we were talking about the concept of the socializing and the socialization of Major League Baseball players. And we kind of, my friend said to me, this is what happens when guys don't have to live in the real world. And I know that you're kind of making that argument too. So how do you try to convince guys that have never been in, let's say, an office environment, which a baseball team is somewhat of that too, because you have people who aren't baseball players who happen to work in an office that's right there, that's inside the same complex as the players are. How do you get them to understand that some of the things that have been allowed in the world of baseball aren't the way that they are in the regular world?
The only way that'll happen is when they become a part of the regular world. And a lot of times that happens by your career ending. Until then, there's a willful decision made by baseball players to be ignorant to what happens outside of the game. I mean, everything that you do is based on what you accomplish in the sport. It is a kill or be killed environment, and you prune off anything that doesn't serve you being successful. I mean, if you think about how cliche the game can be sometimes, keep it simple, stupid, keep it simple, see ball, hit ball, one pitch, one inning, one game at a time. Everything is in the immediate. You live in the present. And so you don't worry about what's outside of your scope of influence in this locus of control, if you will. Baseball players want to be what they see on TV, and the cycle repeats. They want to be myopic. They want to live in a bubble. They want to be in a dream world where I make enough money, I'm super famous, and these people in the front office, these are second-class citizens. The people in the stands are third-class citizens. You exist to serve my narcissism. And it's a really hard lesson. I mean, even people who are very good with the media and very good with fans still hold themselves on a pedestal. And in a lot of cases, they've earned that right because they've achieved something that only a few humans do. But with that comes kind of this myopic thinking that, I'm better than you and I have privileges, I deserve them. I make money, I'm famous, I'm special, I deserve this. Why should I have to sacrifice anything? And there really is no learning how to be a real person until you're in the context that all real people face, the daily grind, the daily sacrifice, doing what you have to put food on the table. These are concepts for a lot of incredible athletes they've just never had to deal with.
Dirk, how do you feel about LaRoche walking away from the $13 million?
He's got enough money. I mean, if that's what he wants to do, that's fine. But I got to tell you guys, I don't feel bad for LaRoche here. He's made enough money. If he wants to go be family first, that's fine. If he's doing it because he thinks that the White Sox are some cruel regime that won't let him raise these kids the right way, that's BS. The person I feel bad for, though, is Drake, because he's in an age right now where he probably doesn't fully understand what's going on. He's going to be reintroduced into some school system someplace, and people are going to ask him, why did your dad quit? Or why did you ruin or end your dad's career? Or look at all the drama you caused your dad. I mean, think about it. If you really wanted to be a good dad right here, why are you making your kid the epicenter for one of the biggest postseason dramas, and probably one that's going to haunt the White Sox for at least a good 6 months now? Why would you do that to your kid? I mean, are you really helping the family at this point? I think I would have just laid low, tried to make the best of it, and not turned this or given this any kind of flammable fluid at all. But that's exactly what's happened here, and the person who's going to suffer from this is probably the kid who doesn't have the tools to deal with it.
I've been trying to figure out what the impact might be on the team from an on-the-field standpoint. You think there can actually be one?
Oh, absolutely. Well, look, gentlemen, I mean, I was never an overly talented athlete. I got my cup of coffee, and people accuse me of that all the time. And so consequently, I had to go back into the real world, and now I'm finishing up my master's degree in business. And one of the things I learned is that, people leave companies. It's not because of the total compensation. They leave a lot because of the bad relationships that they have there. Like team environment, what people get along for, what they fight about, issues that can't be resolved, conflict management, all of that stuff. All of that stuff plays a role in real life, and it plays a role in real baseball. And I've been on both sides of that coin, and I can tell you it's true. You can give guys a lot of money, but they're still going to deal with real people problems like not being able to resolve conflict and having anger management problems and being pissed off about something or feeling like they're not getting what they deserve from management. Like if the team is upset about this, whether it is completely ridiculous or not, if they believe it's an issue, it becomes an issue. And until that issue is addressed, expect some on-field ramifications in some way or another. You'd think that they are getting paid enough money to get over it, but honestly, like I said earlier, they've just never been given the tools to deal with this. All they've been given is cliches.
What should have been or is the role of the manager in a situation like this?
Are you talking about the skipper of the team?
That guy, yep.
Okay, so what has to happen here is, I mean, I hate to say this, but you need to step in and you need to start talking about, look, guys, I know you got drama, but we need to focus on the game at hand. And the reason we need to focus on the game at hand is because if you guys don't win, I get fired. So unless you want to see two people retired this year, you need to get over this and start winning ball games and focus on that priority.
What did you think of the White Sox maybe even threatening to boycott a spring training game?
Well, I mean, okay, like, unless they are really going to seriously fund a daycare center or a foster home at some point, this is just ridiculous. Really, like, I want to see them correlate some kind of numbers to the Drake's presence because he was there and they sucked last year. So I'm just wondering, where's our result here that you're saying that this needs to come back. We need more Drake around or else we can't do our jobs. If you can back that with data for me, I'm on board, but I don't think you can.